North Korea recently held a military parade in honor of the 75th anniversary of their Communist Party. And at the parade, they demonstrated a brand new tank. A tank that has even been compared to T-14 Armata by some media articles. But there is a lot more to it than meets the eye. In this video, we will be analyzing the new Korean tank and see how does it compare to its modern counterparts, well, based on what we know, of course. Before we go any further, a quick word from my sponsor, War Thunder, which is also a game I quite like playing myself. War Thunder is a military vehicle combat online game. It is free to play on PC, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Not to mention that it is cross-platform between PC and consoles. The game features an incredible arsenal of more than 1500 historically accurate playable tanks, aircraft, helicopters and ships from 1930s to 1990s. Best thing about the game are its realistic physics and one of the most detailed and most immersive vehicle damage models in gaming. If you use my link to register, you will receive a bonus, a premium vehicle, tank, aircraft or ship, as well as 3-day account boost. The game is completely free, so you can start playing immediately. The name of the new tank has not yet been disclosed, but it appears it does not belong to the family of other North Korean tanks. By the way, if you want to find out more on the previous North Korean tanks, check out my video where I cover those more in depth. Current North Korean tanks have no thermal sights, which is evident by the fact that the infrared searchlight is still present next to their main gun. North Korean tanks have always been a further improvement of the T-62 tank that they dubbed Chonma-ho. Of course, the upgrades kept bringing the tank closer and closer to modern standards, with composite armor, new gun and so on, but the tank has never been able to reach the standards for the fire control system, because even the latest Chonma-ho upgrade still uses the main gun sight of T-62, including the night vision device, which is the first generation of image intensifier, also known as night vision. But the new tank changed all of that. Not only does it appear that the T-62 chassis is no longer used, it also appears that the tank received thermal sights. The tank now omits the infrared searchlight, which would suggest that the image intensifier has been replaced with a thermal imaging system of unknown generation. This would be a big leap in comparison to the other tanks, but let's not jump to the conclusion. Third generation of passive image intensifiers does not require the infrared searchlight for optimal performance. Therefore, the lack of infrared searchlight does not necessarily mean that the thermal imager is present. But the main gun sight is big enough to house a thermal imager. One of the tanks that uses third generation of image intensifiers is T-80U, for example, and the sight is much smaller, because image intensifiers are less bulky than thermal imagers. Therefore, evidence seems to go in favor of a thermal sight, but since the sight was closed during the parade, it is impossible to be certain. If you paid attention to the position of the main gun sight, you might have noticed that the location of the gunner has been moved from the left side of the gun to the right, together with the commander. Speaking of the commander, he also appears to have his own panoramic sight with a thermal imager, but, again, that is not guaranteed to be a thermal imager. The switch in the locations would also mean that the loader has been moved to the left side. This is more similar to the Western design than the Soviet or Russian. Soviet tanks have always had a gunner on the left and the loader or the commander on the right. The main gun sight was always on the left. It should also be noted that both gunner and loader have their own periscopes, where the loader's one appears to be able to rotate around for observation. Regarding the firepower, the tank appears to have retained the 125mm gun from the other North Korean tanks. According to some info, North Korean APFSDS projectiles can penetrate up to 600mm of rolled homogeneous armor equivalency. This is not spectacular, but it's not bad either. The problem is, it's probably not good enough for North Korea, since their most probable opponents have very powerful tanks. But the info on their projectiles is mostly classified, so take all of that with a pinch of salt. The main gun is evidently unable to fire gun-launched anti-tank guided missiles, therefore ATGM launchers have been added on the side of the turret. And I have to say, this solution is much better than what we could see on their other tanks, where the entire roof of the turret was cluttered in launchers, obscuring the vision of the crew. The main gun also appears to have a muzzle reference sensor, which is common for modern tanks. There also appears to be an automatic grenade launcher on the roof of the turret. The protection of the tank appears to be lacking in some aspects, but let's start from the good things first. The tank appears to have a hard kill active protection system. This is evident by the launcher tubes integrated into the turret armor, and 4 devices that appear to be APS radars mounted on the turret, 2 on each side. At first I thought these might be smoke launchers, but the smoke launchers are mounted further at the back. The capabilities of this active protection system are yet unknown. Now, here is where the problems start to appear. You might have noticed where those launchers are mounted. Yeah, inside of the turret armor. This means that the protection has been reduced on those areas by a significant margin. The position of the coaxial machine gun also does not help. For some reason, instead of mounting it on the gun method, they decided to put it on the actual turret, creating a small weak spot. Now, the roof of the turret appears to have some form of add-on armor, which covers the center of the turret, as well as the left side in front of the loader's hatch. It can't cover the right side because it would obscure the main gun sight. The hull armor design appears to be very similar to the Abrams hull design. The lower front plate is the thickest part with composite armor. The difference here being that the hull armor is much thicker on Abrams than on the North Korean tank. On some stills from the parade it might appear that the upper front plate has some type of explosive reactive armor, but those could just be my eyes messing with me. The side skirts appear to have bolts aligned in a square shape, which could suggest some ERA panels mounted there. And it would make sense since the engine compartment is protected with slat or cage armor. The actual armor protection of the tank does not appear to be on par with other modern tanks, simply based on the thickness of the composite armor, but that's just based on the tank's appearance. The mobility of the tank is completely unknown, but the engine compartment has been visually enlarged compared to other North Korean tanks, which would suggest an engine of bigger volume and therefore more power. But the details on the engine and the transmission are completely unknown. Don't forget to check out War Thunder, where you can take control of many land, air or naval vehicles. Use the link from the description to get a premium vehicle and a 3-day account boost when you register. Remember, the game is completely free for PC, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Just download and play. There has been a lot of speculation whether the tank is, well, an actual tank, or just a refurbished vehicle that's made to look modern with fake components. And I don't know what to tell you about that. I mean, the tank has a lot of weird things done to it, like the cuts in the armor for the APS launchers, weird looking side skirts and roof add-on armor. But that can just be the inexperience of North Korean tank designers. North Korea is not cooperating with any country for their military developments. They have to do everything on their own and can only base things visually from the other nation tanks. No one is going to give them a tank so they can look closely into it. Other countries like Russia, Germany, US, France, UK and so on have a long history of tank development, and they have the ability to share their knowledge with other nations. Not to mention that North Korean tank developers only profit from the domestic orders, while other countries sell their tanks around the globe. Benefit from that is that the money received from foreign sales can fund the domestic development, and the countries that have purchased the tanks can provide further feedback. North Korea unfortunately does not have that option, and because of that, their tanks have had a long history of being underdeveloped. This new tank looks promising, but it's far from being comparable to T-14 Armata. That would be all. If you like my content, you can consider supporting me on Patreon, and if you can't, leave a like on the video or subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you all in the next video. Have a nice day. Buns.